The engine roared like a wounded beast, then died instantly, leaving only silence in the bright morning air of the elite Velocity Motors headquarters. In that same moment, a single decision was made that would destroy a man's dignity in front of hundreds, and erase the truth that he was the reason every championship car in that company had ever won. No one knew the quiet man in the grease-stained shirt standing near the test garage was the invisible architect behind their entire racing legacy. And by the end of that day, they would realize they had fired the wrong person. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the strength of silent heroes, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire so more stories like this can reach hearts that need them. The sun was already high over the sprawling headquarters of Velocity Motors, casting sharp reflections off glass walls and polished supercars lined like trophies. It was a place where ego mattered more than effort, where names on office doors meant more than hands covered in oil. In the middle of it all stood Elias Mercer, a single father who arrived every morning before anyone else and left long after the lights dimmed. He never complained, never asked for recognition, and never corrected the assumptions people made about him being just another temporary mechanic. What they did not know was that Elias had once been the silent force behind the most dominant race engineering team in the country. Years ago, before tragedy reshaped his life, he had designed engines that broke speed limits and rewritten the physics of performance racing. But after losing his wife in a sudden accident, he stepped away from the spotlight to raise his young daughter, choosing survival and stability over fame. Velocity Motors had unknowingly hired him through a subcontracting agency, assigning him to the lowest tier of maintenance work. He accepted it without revealing his past because what mattered to him now was not recognition, but school fees, rent, and the gentle hope of giving his daughter a peaceful life. That morning, everything changed because of a broken engine that no one else could fix. A prototype race car, worth millions and meant for an international championship, had failed during a private test. Engineers argued, managers panicked, and the CEO of Velocity Motors, Grant Holloway, arrived in a storm of anger and arrogance. He was a man who believed control was everything and failure was unacceptable under his roof. When the engine refused to start again after multiple attempts, frustration turned into blame. Voices rose, accusations spread, and in the chaos, Elias quietly stepped forward. Without asking permission, without announcing himself, he opened the engine housing and began adjusting components with calm precision. His hands moved like memory itself, as if every bolt and wire was speaking to him. Within minutes, the impossible happened. The engine purred back to life, smoother than before, as if it had been reborn. But relief never got the chance to settle. Grant Holloway saw only insubordination, not salvation. To him, Elias was a nobody crossing boundaries, touching billion-dollar machinery without authority. In front of engineers, executives, and stunned observers, the CEO ordered him removed immediately and terminated his employment on the spot, accusing him of recklessness and disrespect. Security escorted Elias out while the engine he fixed idled perfectly behind them. No one noticed the subtle detail in that moment, the way the engineers avoided eye contact, the way one of them whispered that the improvement in performance was unlike anything they had ever achieved. Elias said nothing as he walked away. Not because he had nothing to say, but because explaining truth to people who refused to see it was a luxury he could no longer afford. His only thought was his daughter waiting at school with hopeful eyes and a worn-out lunchbox. Days passed, and Velocity Motors prepared for their biggest announcement yet, the upcoming international race where their flagship car would represent them against the world's best teams. But something was wrong. Every time the car hit higher speeds, instability crept in. Every adjustment made things worse instead of better. Panic returned, this time heavier. Engineers revisited Elias's work in secret, only to realize that the adjustments he made were not random fixes but carefully structured corrections that balanced airflow, combustion timing, and thermal pressure in ways their current team did not fully understand. Still, pride stopped them from admitting it publicly. Meanwhile, Elias continued his life quietly. He picked up extra repair jobs around the city, fixed broken bicycles for neighborhood kids, and returned home every evening to help his daughter with schoolwork under a flickering kitchen light. She never asked why he stopped working at Velocity Motors. Children sense pain in silence, and she simply held his hand a little tighter each day. But silence does not erase legacy. One afternoon, a junior engineer from Velocity Motors arrived at Elias's small rented home. He had been sent secretly after discovering archived race footage and engineering records that matched Elias's signature design patterns. What he saw inside that modest workshop changed everything: hand-drawn schematics of engines that had won championships years ago, hidden carefully in old folders. The truth spread internally like fire no one could contain. The man they fired was not just a mechanic. He was the foundation of their success. The CEO refused to believe it at first. Pride is often louder than evidence. But when the championship prototype failed completely during final testing, and the team had no solution left, desperation forced him to reconsider. Grant Holloway visited Elias personally this time, not as a superior, but as a man staring at the collapse of his empire. He found Elias repairing a neighbor's old motorbike in the afternoon sun, his daughter sitting nearby reading a book quietly. The CEO stood there for a long moment, realizing too late that greatness does not announce itself, it serves quietly until it is dismissed. What followed was not a dramatic apology. Life rarely offers clean moments. Instead, it was a conversation built on regret, broken pride, and the slow acceptance that talent had been mistaken for defiance. Elias did not rush to forgive. He spoke about responsibility, about dignity, and about how easily systems discard people who do not fit their image of importance. But he also spoke about his daughter, and the life he was trying to build away from chaos. The turning point came when Velocity Motors publicly collapsed under the pressure of upcoming competition. Without Elias's expertise, their car was no longer competitive. Sponsors began pulling out. Investors questioned leadership. The company that once stood at the top was now fighting to survive. In the middle of this crisis, Elias made a decision that surprised everyone. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the love of engineering itself and the future of the craft he once dedicated his life to. He agreed to return, but under conditions that protected his autonomy and acknowledged the truth that had been ignored for too long. When he stepped back into the Velocity Motors facility, the atmosphere had changed. The same hallways that once dismissed him now carried silence mixed with respect. Engineers who once overlooked him now waited for his guidance. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand attention. He simply worked. Day by day, under the bright afternoon sun filtering through the garage skylights, Elias rebuilt the engine that had once failed. But this time, it was not just a machine, it became a symbol of correction, humility, and redemption. The car that entered the international race months later was unlike anything Velocity Motors had ever produced. It was balanced, powerful, and precise in ways that stunned competitors. When it crossed the finish line ahead of the world's best, the silence in the stadium was followed by a roar of disbelief. And among the crowd, Elias stood not as a forgotten employee, not as a fired mechanic, but as the man whose unseen hands had carried every victory the company had ever known. But his greatest victory was not the race. It was the moment his daughter ran into his arms afterward, smiling with pride that no award could match. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to engage with this video, because stories like this remind us that true greatness is often silent, and real strength is found in those who are overlooked. Before the story ends, there is one special request: leave a comment and share what you would have done if you had been in Elias's place on that day when everything was taken from him. And in the quiet ending of this journey, as the afternoon sun fades over Velocity Motors, one truth remains unshaken: the world does not define your worth, your work, your love, and your resilience do.